quickly here because I know we've got a full agenda. Welcome to Harrisburg University of Science and Technology for our Project Management Innovation Conference 2022. We're really excited about this conference because it is a hybrid conference. We have a lot of friends joining us virtually, so we're going to try to remember to stay connected virtually and in person. It's nice to have folks now at least coming back in person, and we're seeing more and more with all of our conferences. For those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I'm Kelly Powell-Logan, and I'm Vice President for Strategic Workforce Development and University Centers here at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology. And it's my honor to be able to welcome you on behalf of our president, Dr. Eric Dar. He could not be with us today because he is in the United Arab Emirates, where he is working on our next location for our university. So it's great to be expanding around the world. As mentioned, we have this hybrid conference today. 75 of you elected to come here in person at the university, and we're glad to see your faces. I see lots of friends from Pennsylvania state government here, so thank you for walking from your offices this short distance. And for those of you virtually from around the world that may not know where we're located, our capital for Pennsylvania is just a block away, and the university sits right in the middle of the Capitol complex. So very close tie to Pennsylvania state government, and we are very thankful for that relationship. In our audience today, we have a great mix of professionals from information technology to healthcare to construction to folks will correct me, lots and lots of other industries. So exciting to have such a nice mix across the board as far as professions here at the university. When we look at demographics from who was attracted to come to this conference, fortunately, because we have the virtual aspect to it, we have folks represented from about half the United States, states from across the United States. So everywhere from California up to Vermont, from Texas to the Dakotas. So very nice to have such a good representation across the country, and certainly across the state. We have a number of people from the city of Philadelphia that are joining, to the city of Pittsburgh, and everywhere in between here in Pennsylvania. And then the other group that are joining us virtually is our location, our Harrisburg University location in Panama, in Latin America, Panama City, the city of knowledge. So thank you for joining virtually. Glad to have our Harrisburg University location in Panama represented today. So that's very exciting. So just a question for the folks that are joining us virtually. If you chat in the chat box, we are curious how many of you have joined us before at Harrisburg University. So if you've joined virtually before, just say virtually. If you've joined in person, say in person. If you've joined both, say both in the chat box. And then finally, if this is your first time, say first time. So that's for our virtual folks. Now for our folks in the room, how many of you have been here to this Harrisburg location in person before? Hands, please. So good number, yes. Oh, good. Our Keynote faculty member has been here before. And how many people, it's your first time here at the university? Wow, so about half and half. So those that raised their hand the first time need to help those that raised their hand the second time, their lay of the land around the university. And we just wanted to give you a little logistics. We are running 4 tracks today for this conference. So opening keynote, we will all be in this room together to start the day. At lunchtime, lunch will be served on this floor only, which is something a little different for us usually. So you'll all be back here to get your lunch where you got breakfast this morning. And at the end of the day, we're all going to join together again in this room for the closing keynote. As I mentioned, there are 4 tracks, and we're going to keep our energy level up throughout the day. They are on the 4 floors. So this floor, 1151, the 11th floor, 1 floor up, as you literally step off the elevator or step off out of the stairwell, there'll be a room there, 1205. And speaking of that, I'm going to encourage you to take the stairs if you can. There is an open stairwell. You'll be able to get up and down those stairs, but please use the open stairwell, not the one with the doors or you have to go all the way down to the 1st floor. We do have people who are here that can badge you to the different floors if you'd prefer to take the elevator. There just may be a little bit of a wait there, but we do have people here to help you with that. As you know, they're secured elevators if you're going to the secured floors. So as mentioned, 1151, 1205, then 1 floor up, 13056, I can't remember the number, but it's on your paper. And then finally, our 4th track is up in the auditorium on the 14th floor, the very top floor of the university. So 4 tracks running on 4 floors. The one other thing that I wanted to note for the folks in the room, in this room, we have, for the most part, a presenter who is physically here and will be presenting from this room. Likewise, on the 14th floor, the presenter is here and will be in the room presenting. The 2 floors in between, 12 and 13, those are virtual. So the presenter is virtual. So if that makes a difference to you, physical presence here from the presenter and on 14th floor. The one other thing I wanted to mention is if you see 4 things you want to go to and they're all happening at the same time, not to worry. We are recording all of these sessions. So you will be able to go back and watch the recordings later. You'll get an email from the team letting you know where you can watch those. So again, in-person presenter here, in-person presenter on the 14th floor. Just 2 more things, I promise. One of the really important things we want to do is thank our sponsors. We would not be able to do this conference or many of our conferences at such a reasonable cost if we didn't have such great sponsors. So wanted to recognize KPMG, who are, sorry to point you out, standing in the back of the room, wave KPMG. So excellent, excellent partner for the university across the board and in particular for this conference. So please do take some time and visit them at their table. We also have New Paths out there, which is a partner to Harrisburg University. And want to recognize OPS, who is another great sponsor. OPS is also a sponsor of our Government Technology Institute, which I see many of our grads here today. And OPS will be presenting virtually today, so want to thank OPS. Aerial partners, and also want to recognize the PMI Keystone chapter has been such a great partner to the university historically, and we're rekindling that partnership. So thank you to PMI Keystone chapter for being here today. Very excited about that. You probably saw on the last page of the handout, we have a number of upcoming offerings. I want to make sure we point that out for you. So if you're interested, very large PA TechCon conference in August. We have a couple of certificate programs coming up, our IT Leaders program and our Data Analytics program, certificate program coming up. And finally, if you are interested in cybersecurity and know somebody who would be an excellent speaker at our cybersecurity summit, please do ask them to respond to the call for proposals. So that is open now. The one other thing, the last thing before I turn this over to our amazing keynote speaker is, this is, the size of this conference is one of our more intimate conferences. And so we're excited, as I said, that the in-person group is growing each time we have another conference. But this is such an exceptional time to really network with a great group of people who are really passionate about project management. And throughout the day, we're going to have a lot of our really talented students here. So if you're looking for great talent, great project management talent and talent beyond project management, please take that time to connect. You may have your next great employee here sitting to your right or your left, and you may not even know that. So we're so happy to have you here in person. Please do use the time to network in between. Please do visit our sponsor tables. It really is nice to be back and see people face to face. So welcome back. And without further ado, now it is my honor to be able to introduce Dr. Philip Mann, just an amazing, and many of you may have heard him speak at our other conferences. An amazing speaker. We are so fortunate here at Harrisburg University to have him as a faculty member and to have him speak throughout the year at our conferences. So without further ado, Dr. Philip Mann.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can anybody not look at that? It's kind of in your face, isn't it? Got the light shining down on it. It's obvious. It's right here. It's this bright orange thing staring you in the face. For a lot of organizations, this is how they treat the future. It's this bright orange thing staring them in the face. The future for a lot of organizations is next month, next quarter, maybe the next election cycle. It's something they can already see, they can already predict, they can already feel, and if they're at all motivated, are taking some action on already. This conference is about the future of how we manage projects, of the tools we use, of how we employ our people. But it is not this obvious future. It is not the thing that you're already planning for, you're already acting on, you are already taking measure to. It's the future 5, 10, 20 years into the future. Far beyond where most organizations plan currently. Far enough out to where descriptions of what's going to happen have to rely on analogies to other things, like our obvious water bottle. My name is Dr. Mann, and I am interested in innovation. I am interested in the future of our organizations, how our people, our equipment, our technologies, our processes, and our vision all tie together to accomplish what society needs out of us in decades ahead. Today, we're going to do a little tour. Today we want to look at a few things. We want to look at the future of our projects. Believe it or not, the very nature of our projects are going to change. Not just how we run them, but what they are. What constitutes a project? The sorts of equipment, the sorts of machines, the sorts of processes, the people, the stakeholders, all that's going to change. And the industry is already moving that way, if you're listening closely. We're going to look at the tools. There are tools in project management. There are tools to manage projects. There are tools to get things done that people are just dreaming about today. Things that are being born of the concerns and constraints and problems we've experienced recently. And today, we're going to learn about a couple of those. And importantly, we're going to talk about the role of the project manager. Now, I'm going to say project manager a lot. When I say project manager, I don't care what is on the little door panel outside your office. Whether you're a business relations manager, a business analyst, a requirements analyst, a project manager, a program director, a program lead, a PMO director, whatever it is, if you do projects, if you do project things, if you contribute to changes we create in the universe through this mechanism we call projects, when I say project manager, I'm talking to you. Does everybody in here manage projects? You do project things. I am talking to all of you. You are in the right place. Thank you. So our projects are going to change a lot, but it's helpful to kind of think about where our projects come from, because that really hasn't changed. We've been doing projects since antiquity. Projects always start out as some kind of an idea, some kind of a vague notion of a thing. Somebody has this dream in their head that, you know what, right over here, we need to do something different. We need to have something here. And they start thinking about it. Other projects come from this notion of a change, of a shift, of a direction. We're here today, we need to be here tomorrow. And a project is born. And in our modern project environment, we are increasingly seeing projects intended purely to answer a question. Is this possible? Is this feasible? Can we do that? And from these projects, from these ideas, from these notions in people's head, we have to figure out how to make them reality. Now, way back in history, the person who had an idea of the thing that needed to be here was probably the architect or the engineer or the designer. It was a person who had an entire complete ownership of everything there was to do with that thing. They would design it, they would craft it, they would source it, they would oversee the work, they would QA it, they would close it out, and then if they were lucky, they got to own it for a little while. Not always. But old projects like that aren't the way we do things anymore. We don't build gigantic monuments anymore. And certainly we don't build things that stay in, that are born in one person's head and eventually come from that person's head through that person's hands to reality. A big pile of rocks is pretty easy. Yeah, there's some math there. But projects now are much more complicated. Moving into the future of projects, kind of towards the birth of project management as a profession, 50, 60 years ago, when there was such a thing as a project manager, we began to acknowledge this idea of integration, this idea that we couldn't rely on one professional who knew everything. We couldn't rely on that one engineer or that one visionary who understood how everything worked. I mean, you can see that all around you right now. This ridiculous little contraption on my wrist, there is no one person in the world that knows how this works. You have to get a team of about 100 people in the room to get full knowledge of how this thing works. And that's 100 experts, not 100 technicians. Once we made that connection and we started looking at modern projects, meaningful projects, big projects, we had to get somebody to put it all together. We had to find somebody who could manage the project. And now we are all employed. But going forward, as we start answering questions, as we start looking at what is this idea and how does that relate to a question and how do we get that moving, and then that prompts another question, and we get this continuous operation of projects, the role of the project manager is beginning to change. Back when we were making airplanes, and that's the only thing we had to worry about as far as complex projects, and as somebody from aerospace, that kind of hurts me to say that, the idea of the old project that we could create it, build it, finish it, and be done with it is no longer reality. We're having projects such as our Large Hadron Collider here. That is a project that allows us to do projects, that allows us to do projects, that allows us to ask more questions, allows us to create more ideas, allows us to create more projects. So it's an unending series, like some kind of Marvel movie, that just continues on forever, asking questions, creating projects, asking questions, creating projects. So we've come into a position where projects, as we used to know them, something that was an initiative to create some change in the world over here, something that would pop a monument into the sky, build a cool bridge, no longer exist. And the projects that came from that, where we integrated multiple sciences and multiple disciplines together, but we ultimately created a package of something and then gave it to somebody else and let them have it, no longer exist. The future is continuous projects, which means that the project manager, whatever you call project manager, is an integral part of the day-to-day operations of our organizations for all things that are important. If you are creating change, if you are answering questions, if you're making modifications to reality, you're going to be managing projects, even if you're in operations. Now, the future projects look different. The future projects build on that trajectory. The future of projects are going to be continuous. We're looking at projectized operations. Projectized operations. How many of you work predominantly in an operational environment? You have a day-to-day that you do most of the time, periodically put in a project? Awesome. One person. So in an operational environment, and totally fine, in an operational environment, you spend most of your time doing the routine, which makes sense. Most things we do in life are fairly routine. We get up, we brush our teeth, we make our breakfast. That's an operation. That's just routine. But in the business world, more generally, and in organizations like governments, militaries, whatever you have, we're going to start shifting from operations into a chain of continuous projects. We're going to have a starting project. That starting project is going to move into a working series of projects that are going to be continuous iterations on a theme, continuous improvements. We're going to modify and change as we go. The big transition there is that in our current environment, in our most recent past environment, when you launch something in operations and you got it moving, if you wanted to change something, you create a separate project and you do that change and maybe create some efficiency or change a process. Now, that idea that those changes are going to happen is baked into the DNA of the environment. It's baked into how you do business. You're going to have feedback loops that are going to alter your plans, that are going to alter your operations, but they're going to have to be at a much bigger scale than what we currently do. I mean, every office I've ever worked in had a procedure for updating a manual. They had a procedure for updating how you produce a certain thing or create a certain report. But imagine that instead of just having a procedure to update a report, you now have a procedure to figure out if you need that report at all. And that's going to be part of this ongoing project environment. The interesting thing with this to me, from kind of an administrative perspective, is think about the difference organizationally. And this is especially true in larger organizations. We fund operations on a cycle. Every year, we decide we need so many XYZ reports. The XYZ report organization gets this amount of money because they have this amount of people, and we just roll that in every year. How do we fund projects? What's the thing you have to do for a project just about every year? Go ahead. Budget. You have to justify it. So what we're saying here is what we used to call operations, it was more or less a guaranteed pot of money, barring political constraints and stuff. Even things that we currently consider operations in this projectized environment, we're going to have to justify their existence every year. So in essence, the landscape of where our operations used to live itself is an ongoing project. In certain sectors, you could see this kind of creeping in. It certainly was creeping in aerospace when I left. That was just a few years ago. It's creeping in at the federal level. You're going to see it creeping in all kinds of organizations to where they need to justify everything they're doing all the time. Because we live in a world of scarce resources. And people are finally realizing that you need to be able to pull the levers on all of those resources potentially and optimize how they're used and optimize how you're negotiating and managing across them. And this is a key to that. Give this one 5 to 7 years. 5 to 7 years, and it'll be the majority of large organizations will be largely projectized. The next big update to our projects, and we're still talking about the nature of projects themselves, is ridiculous amounts of integration. Currently, in our project environments, when we talk about integration, we're usually talking about taking this project and mashing it up with this project. In a lot of cases, it's this contract mashed with this contract, mashed with this ongoing operational thing. And that's a basic website update in any organization. The projects of the future are going to be huge umbrellas that cover everything. Everything you need. And remember, we're talking about the whole operation being a project anyway. So that operational umbrella is going to include major innovations and major updates that are going to be fully integrated by default. So that means shared resources, shared information. In the current environment, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the tools, but in the current environment, integration doesn't happen at anywhere near the rate it needs to, partially because of data and information ownership. Is everybody familiar with the term NDA? Yeah. Non-disclosure agreements. You can quite literally, and this actually happened on a federal project I worked on, where I was working on 2 separate projects. The hardware project had an NDA that didn't let me take that information to the software project I was also working on. That kind of compartmentalization has to go away. And that type of compartmentalization is going away. So what does that mean? That means that organizations are going to have to consider the total effort, the total work, the total coverage, and make sure that they get their arms around all of that. So there's not an NDA blocking your hardware person from talking to the software person, or blocking your operational person from talking to the user and talking to the implementer. We're going to integrate everything. Integration is going to be the default, not the exception. Right now, it's more or less the exception. I know we have some process people here that are very, very, very well versed in not integrating projects. And I know you'll hear about some of that later. But we're going to integrate by default. The thing I like about this future is for the people here, the people that are paying attention, the folks that are not thinking about the obvious answer to everything. The obvious answer is just keep doing what you're doing, right? It's always the obvious. You can do this today if you're running a project. This doesn't require any kind of organizational change. But I put this one, the full span of integration, about 10 years. Because of one word: lawyers. The legal houses that don't want one person to be sued for what somebody else knows are what's keeping us in the way. It's what created that whole raft of NDAs that came out of the 90s that we're still dealing with today, those non-disclosure agreements. But if you have control of your organization and you have an understanding of the span of your projects, do this today. Take this with you. The next part of our project the changes to our projects are going to be that we are going to deal with new technologies. Now, this graphic is a little bit personal to me, because that is a penny. Everybody's seen one of these a couple times? I had to dig this out of change. I don't carry cash, but it's a penny. Back around 2002, when I was in between my military time and working on a different career, I had the joy of working in an environment that did thin film research and development. Now, that might not mean anything to you, but what we did was we took the technologies that you used to build semiconductors, to build microchips, and a team of 6 technicians, of which I was one, and 25 PhDs, figured out how to take that technology and do other things with it. The company I worked for created a process to build a solar sail. Now, we were research and development. We didn't build the solar sail. We created a technology to do it. And just like this, these couple little squares in this penny, we created a technology to do that. These little squares are solid-state thin-film batteries. Each one of those in our lab, that big one actually, again, penny. That big one would power your cell phone for a week when they were in our lab. That was 2002. The very first solid-state battery that became commercially available came out in 2007. It was about 4 times that size and probably wouldn't power anything that we have in this room. No technology I can see. Just didn't have much capacity. But the project I was working on was a technology that was already being integrated in a planning process into future technologies. We had partner companies we worked with that were in a similar field of R&D that were coming up with a way to use this battery that could power your cell phone for a week to power a pacemaker for 10 years. So the projects you are going to work on, the things you're going to build, and this is whether you're hardware, software, people, whatever you're doing, at some point in time, these projects are going to involve technologies that have not been invented yet or have not been solidified yet. For kind of a sense of scale, the commercial one came out in 2007. What other innovative thing came out in 2007? Does anybody, any trivia people here? The iPhone. The very first iPhone. Which one's more innovative? A new cell phone of which we'd had on the market for 10 years? Or a physics-defying battery? My money's on the battery. That's innovation. That's changes. So the new technologies you're going to have to deal with and the new processes, procedures, and ways of doing work in your projects and the nature of the projects themselves are going to get away from this idea of, oh, we're just going to make a little change to an existing thing. You're going to come up with something new entirely. And that new thing may be in a lab today. When I started working on these, they were only 10 years out of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the very, very first experimental work on them. 10 years after that-ish, they finally got to a commercial market. Maybe 10 years from now, they'll actually be useful for something. And I realize that's a little bit of an extreme because it is just groundbreaking technology. But think about the electric cars. If you want to modernize a city, modernize the transportation in a city, there's something of this scale, probably bigger, but there's something technologically of this scale that you need in order for that project to work. And you're going to have to find it, and you're going to have to include it, and you're going to have to make it viable in your environment. So we've got a lot of fun projects coming up. Next thing we want to look at is the way projects are structured. Now, I personally like this. This is Lockheed Martin's, it's actually the Air Force's next generation air defense. It's a mock-up from Lockheed Martin. but it is the very first that I'm aware of big project that is changing fundamentally the way projects are structured. Way back when I showed you that SR-71 Blackbird, that enormous old spy plane, that project was designed, built, prototyped, tested, maintained, and ultimately decommissioned all by one company. It was intended to last 30 plus years. It had one mission. This thing? Already today, and this is an ongoing concern, this is an existing program. They have contracts out for one company to do design work. Design work only. Take this thing, put it on paper. Make a few iterations, put it on paper. They have a separate contract for somebody to build the prototypes. Different company. They're investigating other projects, other contracts, to actually do the maintenance of it. So in the same way that our operations are getting put under umbrellas of big, huge project umbrellas, the projects we're working on are going to be broken apart and held underneath an umbrella. There's one umbrella that is the Next Generation Air Defense Program. There are probably going to be 80 to 100 major contracts and major projects under that. And the kicker to me, it's going to remain an ongoing operational concern, because this first round is only intended to last about 10 or 15 years max. It's being designed to be replaced almost as soon as the first ones fly, because the technologies are advancing that fast. And because new innovations are happening, and because new realities are happening in the environment where these have to operate, not the least of which is human constraints, our sensibilities about war, all these big picture kind of things are changing. Because those things are changing, this whole program from the ground up has to be designed to change. We can't build something, imagineer in our head that it's going to last 100 years, and then just forget about it. Maybe try to modernize it, maybe make a little change, update some engines or something, change some software. Now, this thing's designed for an overhaul every 10 years, a completely new platform, completely new systems. And the projects we work on are more and more going to look like this. Again, think about that operational umbrella where everything's becoming projectized. Making new things, maintaining things, those are all going to fall into that same sort of deal. And we're going to have to justify them, and we're going to have to change them as we need to, and ultimately keep what's useful, get rid of what's not. And that's what this whole program is designed for. It's only designed to last as long as it's needed, and not a day longer. I think that this will be the end, or at least will be the beginning of the end, for those lifelong silos that people have, where they start up a program, when they go to work for the organization. 25 years later, they retire, and only after they retire does the program eventually end. This is going to be the end of that. Now this, broadly, this is cutting edge right now as far as program project management. This is cutting edge. To see this more broadly distributed is probably going to be closer to 20, 25 years, to where every organization, or the majority of big organizations, are doing it this way. Because we're still building things that, although there's an argument to be made that the people creating Joe's phone here have designed it that he'll replace it, they haven't really designed it to be replaced. They've just designed it to encourage him to buy another one. This is designed to be replaced. This is designed to be cast in a bin or modified or updated only if absolutely needed. Think about the services you provide to people, the goods and services you do that help people, help the public, that help organizations. Those things are only going to be kept around as long as they're useful. As soon as they're no longer useful, gone. Now, looking at the tools, the future of project management tools. So we've just spent the last 25 minutes or so talking about the way projects themselves are going to be structured. I want you to think about the future of tools. Now again, we're not looking at Captain Obvious tools here. We're not thinking about, oh, I want this new version of Jira, or I want this new Microsoft project. We're not thinking about that. We're thinking about what's going to drive the changes, not what's the thing you can subscribe to and pull down from the web next week, or what's the next version of the beta test or whatever. What is the actual class of tools that's going to be available that maybe we're just barely seeing today? The first of these is radical collaboration. Radical collaboration. Now, we all collaborate. And with the events of the last couple of years, we've done a little more collaborating. Has anybody noticed that their online meetings and networks kind of expanded a little bit during the, we'll call it the off season? Yeah. You have lots of times when we used to be in this building all the time, the faculty used to be in this building, if we had a meeting, it was generally limited to the people that were in the building. Every once in a while, somebody would call in. I had a meeting last week that was a 3-person concern. We had 45 people on the call. It turns out we had a broader group of stakeholders. And this radical collaboration is being driven by those trends. Yeah, they're the tools. There's the Zoom and the Teams and the bulletin boards and the Slacks and all those that are kind of enabling it at the low level right now. But think about how it's used presently. That meeting that I had, it just kind of worked out that there were that many people in the meeting. And it was one person asking another person, hey, we got this thing going on. You want a piece of this? Hey, you've got some expertise in this area. You want to join us? But it was still incidental, one-off, one person inviting 1 or 2 other people, and it eventually kind of cascaded. But what if your default mode of engaging stakeholders, if the basic way that our business relationship managers conduct their job is to cast the widest possible net right from go, from the very beginning. You cast the widest possible net, maximum participation. And then you allow people to attrit or allow people to drop off as they see themselves no longer contributing. How big would that meeting be? I mean, think about it. Yeah, I used to work in aerospace. I used to build airports. How many stakeholders do you suppose Denver International Airport has? Or 100? Probably close to about 7 billion. Because that major airport affects commerce globally. You can fly to Shanghai from Denver. Guess who your stakeholder group includes now? China, or at least some people in China. We're going to have to think more broadly about who we involve and do it deliberately to encourage them to collaborate with us, to encourage with them to share their insights, share their data, and share what they need so that we can integrate what we're trying to do with what they have going on and the people next to them. Now, that radical collaboration is going to come with a big price. Huge price. Time. Anybody try to collaborate with 1 billion people? And in this radical collaboration scenario, every one of those 1 billion people has a voice. Now, if you're dealing with something locally here, maybe a couple million people, a couple million direct stakeholders. If you're doing a transportation project, how many potential people could ride that, say, over the next 2 years? It's a lot. Those numbers get to be pretty big. But this is going to become the default. And it's going to become the default also as one of our data entry points. But we're not going to do this alone. One of the next big tool sets we have is smart software. This is our artificial intelligence, machine learning, our blockchain stuff. This sort of software, our smart software, and by smart software I mean not just a really cool spreadsheet. And we're not talking just scripts and algorithms. We're talking software that makes decisions. As an example, imagine that you have a project scheduling software that is actually smart software. It's receiving all of your shipping information. It's receiving all your staffing information. It knows who is out sick this morning. And it adjusts the work automatically based on 1,000 different parameters, some of which the project manager just physically cannot be aware of. Smart software is going to do that. So that makes that idea of radical collaboration look a little more manageable, right? Maybe we've got some smart software algorithms that'll help us sort through and help us engage with some of our stakeholders. Some of the automated chatbots that are out there now will be part of this. There'll be some automated chatbot that's engaging stakeholders directly, talking to them like it's a person, and they won't know the difference. I mean, that's true today at the high end, at the very high end. So maybe we can engage 1 billion stakeholders or a couple million stakeholders, and we can get that information. Now, one of the key innovations that I like, and that's why I included on here, is the idea of this blockchain stuff. Now, for folks who are a little familiar with blockchain thinking, isn't that like cryptocurrencies? Because it is the backbone to a lot of cryptocurrencies, is the idea of blockchain. But blockchain itself at a very, very, very basic level, and I am not the mathematician to explain the whole thing to you. Blockchain is just this idea that there's a register for everything, that every transaction has a verifiable, provable, non-forgeable way to track everything. Some of the blockchain-enabled technologies that I am excited about include this thing called smart contracts. Smart contracts are essentially automatically executed contracts. Imagine that you're pulling in all this data. You got your radical collaboration going. You've got all your AI and machine learning stuff. And you have agreements for a precondition for a certain payment to be made or a certain payment to be collected. Once the blockchain registers that those things have happened, because remember, it's just a ledger, basically. It's just data. Once the correct data is in place, that contract executes. Because somewhere farther up the register, there is an absolutely unfalsifiable identity of your signature saying, I agree, and of the other person's signature saying, I agree. And that made it happen 6 months ago. So the instant that happens, the instant those conditions are met, that contract is executed, done. More automation. But now, we've just unemployed a few lawyers. Now, the last piece of the tool thing is just the culmination of all this stuff. So much data. So much data. We've got millions of stakeholders. We've got hundreds of chatbots. We've got thousands of smart contracts. The challenge that we're going to have, and this is both a tool and a challenge. Has everybody heard the term paralysis by analysis? Paralysis by analysis. What is paralysis by analysis?
Just have too much information. You can't act. You can't move forward.
Yeah, having so much information that you cannot make a decision. I've already told you, you're going to have a lot of information. You're going to have all the information. But in this data, you're going to be able to make better decisions. As long as our tools work, and as long as our collaborations and things work, you're going to be able to make decisions you cannot possibly make today. Now, by way of analogy, there were a couple of studies where testing out machine learning against cancer diagnosis. In both of these studies, I think it's probably 3 or 4 now, they took a set of radiology data, a set of known diagnostics for cancer patients, gave this whole pile to 50 board-certified cancer doctors, experts, undeniable experts in their field. They gave the same pile of data to one machine learning system. They did this a couple different times, and both times the physicians got destroyed. The physician's accuracy rate, and we're talking about a panel of the best doctors you can round up. And the outcomes were known. In the study, people knew who had and who didn't have cancer. The doctors, the physicians, the best educated, highest skilled people in the world averaged less than 40% correct. Less than 40%. And it took them a week to get to that 40% or 60% wrong. The machine took about 20 minutes, got close to 90% correct. 90% correct results today, not next week. But the intriguing thing to me is not just the magnitude of the difference, it's the why. And it all came down to data. You see, they started asking these algorithms, they started asking these machine learning systems, like how is it, digging into the code, digging into the step-by-step analysis of this data, how is it that the machine was so much more accurate? That's what we want to know, because we want accurate. We don't want people running around with cancer and not be able to tell them they got cancer, and more importantly, treat it, right? Turns out that among the data sets, which were identical, the physicians had the same set of data that the machine had, identical. The machine got more out of it. Because it turns out, if you're a machine, you had way more data. Because in that imagery, and I don't remember if it was MRIs, CT scan, whatever it was, in that imagery, it turns out there are absolutely critical shades of gray that the human eye cannot see. A person with perfect vision and absolutely complete knowledge and the absolute best skill in the world simply does not have access to information that is right in front of their face. They can't see it, but the machine can. So when we start looking at so much data, we are going to be sifting through this, and we are going to find those shades of gray that elude us as human beings right now. There are going to be data points in there that today we cannot act on because they're invisible to us. But tomorrow, with our smart software, with our algorithms, with our AI systems, we will be able to make decisions that only the machine understands. So we are potentially going to have much better decisions, much cleaner decisions, much more accurate decisions. But those decisions are going to be made by systems that can see things that we are blind to, that we simply cannot see. And that's important. Now, when we get onto this stuff with projects, when we start incorporating that level of granularity in our projects, it's probably about a 15-year time frame. Because we have to gather the data first. And right now, we're just not gathering data because we're human beings. We only scrape data away when we think it's important. But when we get these other systems in, including our radical collaboration, we are going to start just having data land in our laps. Initially, so much data we can't make a decision. Later, so much data that only a machine can make a decision. And in 15 years, the machine's going to have to make a decision, or you're not going to have a project. Now, the last bit I want to look at is the future of the role. Now, the future of the role for a project manager, and again, this is all people that run projects, really centers around this idea of growth of the role. For decades, project managers quite often have been just glorified technicians. They've been schedulers, they've been, maybe a requirements analyst, maybe they kind of made a few supply orders, created a couple contracts, but they generally operated pretty far down in the food chain. It's usually project executives, higher level people that told the project manager what to do. As a familiar scenario, for any of you who've worked projects, especially as kind of a junior person, it's very common for somebody to come up and give you a project and say, here you go, here's your project, have fun. That's all the input you had was, yes ma'am. But the future of project managers is in strategic decision making. We're going to be in a world where everything is projects. Our operations are projects. And the projects and those operations are only going to be sustainable if they're strategically viable, if they allow our organization to do what our organization does and move us forward. To that end, we are going to have to get very, very, very good, not only at just our communication skills and communicating what we know, but we're going to have to get very good at measuring value objectively. One of my past jobs was as kind of a business case analyst. I did a lot of project decision making for my agency. I was that guy that they give me a bunch of projects and say, all right, what should we spend taxpayer money on? And I gave them an answer. Sometimes they did not like that answer. But every time, there was an objective basis to it. One of the things that hurt me the most in that job was when I would see them give me a past example, say, we want you to do it like this. And it was largely somebody who said, oh, we kind of like this, it's intangible, spend $1 billion. Like, no. So I did it the right way. And as a result of coming up with objective value and understanding strategic decision making, I changed the federal congressional budget several times. I have line items in the budget that belong to me. You know how many times I had to go explain myself to Congress? 0. Because I clearly explained the objective value. And I explained it based on their strategic needs. And at the end of the day, there were no questions. They understood what I said, and they incorporated it. Full stop. And as project managers, and business relation managers, and business analysts, you get the idea, you are going to have to get very good at that. Very good at that. You're going to have to get very good at writing up the explanation of why something is worth the money you're going to spend on it. Not, oh, this is a cool idea, we think it'll help, but I think this will give us X amount of benefit and is worth this amount of cost and will take a place over this amount of time. Footnotes are going to be your friend. Additionally, and related to this, we're going to have to get very good at stewardship. And by stewardship, I mean responsibility for the resources we're using. Now, for folks in the public space, where your employee handbook is some form of statutes, you have ethics statutes that you follow, this is probably already baked into you. But for folks that are in bigger organizations that are not covered under statutes as your employee handbook, stewardship is normally something that's limited to corporate officers. Like absolute, actual, factual stewardship is something that only an executive or corporate officer can actually be held accountable for. But as a project manager or somebody who's running an operational project, one of those umbrellas, you're going to have to get very good, along with the objective value in defending your own projects, you're going to have to get very good at shepherding and stewarding resources to get the maximum use out of what you have. Because ultimately, those resources are not ours. Those resources belong to our organization. Those resources sometimes belong to our taxpayers. Those resources do not belong to us. They are not ours. They're on loan. And we need to make the best use out of them so that we can fulfill our part of the equation, which is giving our stakeholders the goods and services they need with those resources. We're going to get very good at partnerships. Partnerships. See also radical collaboration. You're going to have to cast broad nets for partnerships. But additionally, these need to be durable. You're going to need to be able to strike up relationships and partnerships with people that you don't normally deal with. And you're going to need to be able to sustain those. You think about that next generation air defense thing, where they're taking what would normally traditionally be a big, massive project that would be very easy with one relationship with one or two big vendors, and they have no idea who's even going to maintain it anymore. No idea. But building partnerships with people helps you understand the pool of potential resources that you have available. Striking up partnerships across map boundaries, different states, different counties, different countries. Having partnerships, public, private, and sustaining those allows you to kind of create an ecosystem where you can make some of the decisions and gather some of the data that you're going to need. Because just going with what you know, if maybe you're the expert and you have a certain community of people that you're very attached to, that's going to be a liability. Because if that community changes, or that job changes, or those people change, your value of relationships just went out the window. So you're going to have to get very good at making and sustaining partnerships. And lastly, hybrid, hybrid, hybrid. If you are pre-committed to any methodology, if you're an agilist and you're a committed agilist, you're going to be out of a job. Because projects are going to have to use a variety of methodologies. You're going to have to tailor a predictive method with several iterative methods inside of it, with maybe a prototyping method over here for this one particular part of it. You're going to have to become very conversant with the whole cosmos of methodologies. And importantly, you are going to have to mix and match those just to get your work done. You're going to have to use the variety that is out there. Folks that are pre-committed to a certain way of doing business, just like people that are committed to a certain type of project they're doing or a certain operational structure today, are going to be out of a job, or worse. They're going to be destroying public trust. They're going to be breaking stuff. They're going to be wasteful. They're going to be horribly failing at their strategic place in their organization. Now, with all these things that we've talked about today, about the types of projects we're working on, the types of tools we're going to have available, and the way our role is going to change over the next few years. And to be honest, most of these are kind of more near term. I want you to go through the rest of the tracks today and think about the future. Don't think about the obvious future. Think about where your organization is going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. Think about and engage with your speakers. They are going to be talking about today, they're going to be talking about their observations, but they're doing it with an eye on how you can be better and your organization can be better in 10 to 20 years. So pay attention to that. Ask those future questions and make sure that you are getting more out of it than just the obvious. Have a good morning.
Any questions for Dr. Mann? We'll get the microphone here. I think we have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check, anyone in the room have any questions for Dr. Mann? Yes, PN, we'll start with Treasury.
Thank you, Dr. Mann. You're talking about the F-35, am I correct? That's the project you're talking about, the Lockheed Martin?
No, that's the Next Generation Air Defense Program. That's still in concept.
Okay. Because
Yeah, the F-35 is moving, but it started out heading kind of that way. They haven't really broken that up yet, though.
The reason I was asking that was $1 trillion trouble
Yep.
project, or I was wondering how that relates to your discussions.
Yeah, a lot of the things that are seeing, a lot of things come up, especially with that Next Generation Air Defense Program, and programs that are like that, or Next Generation Air Dominance. A lot of it, they're seeing it as the result of the problems and failures with the F-22 and the F-35 and some of the newer, not even just aircraft. They're seeing that with larger DoD and larger governmental contracting and design things. They're seeing where those failures happen, and they're essentially doing what we should all be doing, saying, all right, how do we not do that again? How do we not find that hole? And you get a different result by using a different method. And that's deep down, yeah, that's a good connection to make, is they are, and we're seeing it. And in one place I thought we'd never see it is in DoD. And they're leading a charge on it.
I think we had another question back here, yes.
Hi there. Hey, I think the tools section was kind of cool, but the thing is that scares me is as an IT project manager that works mostly on stopping fraud, this seems to be like handing the bad guys just massive corruption power.
Yeah.
So how do you stop that?
Well, a lot of it in the future, and again, this is future-looking stuff. This is 5, 10 years out. A lot of things with the data is we're going to have there's going to be something with data security happening somewhere in there. And if you think deep down, future technology I don't even talk about a whole lot, but it is certainly relevant in your domain, are things like quantum computing. Like think about what quantum computing does in terms of encryption. Right now it's just a volume game. And for folks that don't know, quantum computing is like the uber holy grail of computing. It's so powerful it'll break any encryption. But that's kind of those technologies are currently in development now. But in order to leverage it for some of that stuff, they're going to have to get those technologies going to use it full board. And I'm not trying to suggest anywhere in there that people just mindlessly open the floodgate and just let it go, because there are reasons to have absolutely locked down systems. There are reasons to have completely air-gapped, isolated systems. But the challenge that we've had with a lot of things is that people have just kind of arbitrarily put up things like non-disclosure agreements and things like that that have absolutely no reason to be there. And we're just going to have to be more conscious as project managers that if we're putting something in like a non-disclosure agreement, or we're putting in some kind of a barrier for data exchange or a barrier for collaboration, we need to be doing it with the specific reason in mind, not just because, oh, we always do that, which is where most of us encounter NDAs. This is because, well, we always do an NDA, even if it's not necessary or not helpful. That work? I can go on.
Have another question here?
Sure.
Yeah, along those lines, when you have any kind of big data situation, you're getting that data from somewhere, a lot of times it's people's personal data, and that does bring up a lot of ethical questions. You mentioned that a lot of government organizations have ethical guidelines that they go by. Do you have any suggestions for ethical guidelines for us non-government people?
Honestly, I would do the obvious thing, is I would actually look at those government regulations to see which ones apply to you, because they've gone through great effort. And this is one of our overlying things, kind of similar to the F-35 question over here a second ago, is it's totally okay to not have to invent it yourself. And if there is an ethics order that the Federal Aviation Administration wrote that matches 80% of what you do, take that 80%. It's all public domain. It's government. You can use it. You can copy it all you want. Just copy it, update the 20% you need, and start there.
Thank you.
Any other? Oh, I see one more question, and I think we're getting close to time, and I know Dr. Mann is going to be doing another session just after break up on the 14th floor if you don't get a chance here.
All right, thank you. My question is about capitalizing on this smart technology and it founding its decisions on areas that cannot be easily named and explained in human vernacular because they're capable of something that our minds are not. With our ability and need as project managers to explain the why, how do we explain the why if we're leveraging technology that is processing information and we haven't caught up with it? How will we do that?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be similar to how they explained the cancer thing I was explaining, is essentially they figured out what the process was, but they didn't try to explain every single data point. And I think that's one of the holes we're potentially going to get into, and I certainly saw it when I was doing project value analysis, is there's this tendency that we want to be able to answer for every single data point when we really can't. It's totally fine if there is a good method, an accepted way to calculate something, to say this is what went in, this is what came out. Footnote, see that calculation. So we're going to have to make liberal use of stuff like that. And I think it's going to be more, I think with a lot of projects, it's going to be less about like things we just simply can't explain, like an invisible shade of gray. And it's going to be more things that are related to, say, putting RFID tracking in all of our little inventory things. And then we're going to see that, as we maintain, we manage our inventories in our buildings, there's going to be some storage project, and we're going to find out that, well, these things keep going to a certain place, or they keep wandering out through the door or out through the gate. And that discovery, that unintentional discovery that people are stealing all of our little stuff, is going to open up for us a whole other set of questions about addressing our inventory problems with potentially some kind of a disciplinary thing. And I think those are probably some of the more realistic things that we're going to see as a project manager. But if you get to in a situation where there is an algorithm that gives you an answer, as long as you know what went in and what goes out, is a good result, then in most cases I've only had to ever just refer to the algorithm. Say, all right, this is the formula, this is the tool we used. Here's a footnote about how that works. Go check that out if you want to, and that was it.
Just one final check. Sydney, did we have anybody online that had a question? Let me quick run back here. I don't want to forget about our virtual audience here, and then we'll let folks go on break.
All right. What skills should PMs be focusing on to meet the future needs AI?
The future needs with AI. I am not an AI expert, but for people that are going to be working in AI, you're going to want to consult people that are specialized in that. But if you're as a project manager who is not a technical AI person, you're going to want to learn and want to keep abreast of the potential integrations of AI and machine learning with other things. You're going to want to be aware of where it could touch. So essentially the Venn diagram of where the technologies overlap and where it's a potential replacement technology for existing methods or existing models.
I know we've run out of time here. Could one last round of applause for Dr. Mann, please? So as mentioned, Dr. Mann will be up on the 14th floor after our break. We have a break from 10 to 10:15, and so up in the auditorium, if you'd like your session, what's your session?
Session is about divisions in the workplace and it's a personnel-focused thing about how to get people on board with your strategy.
Okay, excellent. And then in this room at 10:15, we have an HU student graduate who is going to be talking about humility and its importance in project management. So again, if you would like to see an in-person presenter, it's in this room or the 14th floor. And then we have two great tracks that are virtual presenters, quantum computing, which will be one floor up. And our final session is 2 floors up in 1305. So with that, 15-minute break, and we'll see you back at 10:15. There's still breakfast and coffee out here. Thank you.